So before we start, I just want a quick show of hands. How many of you have your presence on social media as an organization? Okay. And how many of you actually have a proper agency handling social media or customer service through social media? Fantastic. So before I start, I'd like to take some inputs. I'd like to keep this session interactive because I'm sure it's close to lunch and most of you would then tend to. What has been your experience social media through customer service? So this gentleman raised your hand. So if you can, if there's a mic, somebody can just pass a mic there.
Okay, let me just talk. I think everybody can hear me. I work with hotels.
Okay.
And our interaction with our public is also a lot of social media. Twitter and Facebook being primary. But I count also things like TripAdvisor as part of social media.
Okay.
And by and large, the issue lies in trying to connect what you do and the amount you spend on social media
Right.
with the footfall or the benefits and revenue that you get out of it.
Right.
So while everybody talks about the importance of social media and reaching out and making sure that you're seen with it as a brand, what I hope to learn from this session is where do you make that translation? Where's the balance? Where's the bang for buck coming for the amount of time we invest in social media activities?
Okay.
Where's the bang for buck? Where's the ROI? I'm sure there is some, and it's intangible, but can we try and make it more tangible over time?
Absolutely. So I think that's a fantastic expectation. Anybody else with their expectations? What else do you expect out of this session? Because this session is very generic in nature, but I can maybe try to tailor the presentation specifically to some of the requirements here. So anybody else who would like to add to this gentleman? Who else raised their hands? I'm sorry, I just forgot that. Yeah, so if you can, what are your expectations?
Definitely ROI is on my mind since, I'm, thanks.
Right.
I work with Jubilant Foodworks, which is
Okay.
with the brand Domino's Pizza.
Right.
So we are, present on the social media, and specifically, yes, Twitter and Facebook, because there is, where maximum of, prospective customers are.
Right.
And ROI is definitely not there on my mind. I just want to have a better understanding here.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, if I know we have an agency, one single negative comment there,
Right.
Gets so much of attention, and it becomes like, it's like it has a snowball effect. Than, a good compliment or, an appreciation. So yes, it's very important. It definitely scares us, sitting there, reading it. And there is a lot that, go behind resolving or, setting that right. So I just want to know more about this. That's it.
Great.
Nothing
So
specific.
I hope to burst some of the myths. So a lot of people shy away from social media because the whole premise is that, what if I respond and if it's negatively construed, or what if I get defensive and then people think that, the company is wrong. So hopefully I'll try to present and maybe answer some of those queries. And feel free to interrupt me at any point. So let's not have the typical Q&A session towards the end, so that we are fresh in the moment. Yeah. So changing paradigms. So we're living in times where it's not just about the brand speaking to the consumers. It's a very interactive means. So just pay attention and what this says, that any consumer can become an influencer by having a bad experience and have their tweet go viral. So what is the meaning of this? As opposed to the past where you had maybe a popular journalist or maybe someone who's influential in a space who could have gone out and said something bad. Today, anybody on social media can be that point that emanates the negativity. So do not for a second think that, take as social media is there. And I mean, people can talk, can say something bad, and I can just sit back and, maybe step in only when it is required. So anybody can be an influencer on social media, and as an organization, you need to take cognizance of that fact and move in that direction. Now, this is coming back to exactly your point, right? What does it say? Contrary to conventional wisdom, customers are more inclined to talk about a positive experience and complain about a negative one. And this is not my words. So these are actually part of a very extensive survey that was conducted by American Express. Now, I've experienced that personally, from an organizational standpoint. You're more likely to see a negative, or you're more likely to focus on a negative complaint. But what we don't realize is there's also a lot of conversations happening. It may not necessarily be negative, but maybe neutral in tone. So to me, positive is not necessarily just the positive, but also neutral to positive. So long as they're not talking bad, conversations are conversations. So if I were to do some kind of an analysis or sentiment analysis, so this is again a term in social media where you measure the amount of positive to negative. So to me, positive is positive and neutral, because these are conversations, and these conversations tend to then sort of bury some of the negative. So keep the conversations alive. Don't worry about the fact that they're speaking extremely, don't get fixed with the fact that they should only be speaking extremely good about you. So good and neutral is fine. But yeah, I mean, given the incentive, but what is important here is that you incentivize positive conversations. A lot of brands, I mean, not everybody is an Apple where people will just go gaga about the brand. So give that incentive, give people the reason to speak, something that you can carry back, right? So for example, what we did at Mahindra Holidays was we ran this Twitter activation contest across our resorts. And we put up these standees at some of our key resorts, at places where we were expecting the experiences to be good. And that message simply said that tweet about your experience and be in for a surprise. So then, I mean, so we had the naysayers saying that no, this will not work. And in fact, people may just go ahead, and now you're telling them that, okay, this is how you can talk about us, and then they may go and say, a lot of nasty things. But to our surprise, I mean, they were negative, but the positive sort of trumped the negative, by a factor of 3. So eventually what happened was there were a lot of people, and people who were never on Twitter actually, signed up accounts on Twitter and started writing good things about us. So that's a message that you need to carry back. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Do you think this still holds?
As in?
This still holds. I mean, customers will talk about or give a positive survey than a negative one, because typically what we've seen in surveys is that you'll get more negative surveys than positive surveys, even though your scores may be still higher on the positive side. And that's probably more cultural, at least as far as India goes.
True.
So talk about and surveys are two different things.
True. So yeah, I mean, this was probably done in the context of social media, brands on social media, and this was exactly what came out. So, but then again, it depends on the question that you ask and the series of questions that are laid out. I think that makes all the difference. And this is hygiene. 58% of consumers want the company to respond to comments if they're tweeted about a bad experience. What that means is that when they put something on social media, they expect the company to respond back, and respond back fast. Don't respond back after 10 days, and then by the time you're not only pissed with the fact that you responded too late, and that it really leaves a bad taste. We're living in times where there's a deluge of advertisement, a deluge of somebody else telling you what to do, which is why there's a certain sense of skepticism, and there's a message that comes from corporates. What social media can help do is sort of ignite the whole word of mouth aspect. What I meant by that is that social media is peer-to-peer communication. Social media is where you sort of seed conversations within your social networks, and then get people talking about you, because you're more likely to be influenced by what your peer says as opposed to what the organization says. So social media becomes a layer between you and the consumer. Remarkable and entertaining stuff, great customer service experience. These are the conversations. This is what people are talking about. But what needs to be understood here is that communities are being formed on a daily basis. What I meant by communities are people have forums. People actually have their brand pages on social media. So if you do not step in as a brand, somebody else is doing it. So it makes sense for an organization to step in and take hold of the communities as opposed to people randomly. Because I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that. For example, Domino's may have had a few groups started by some other people. Domino's is one of your brands, right? Or maybe Dunkin' Donuts. So you have others coming in and forming groups. So do you want that, or do you want to sort of step in and say that, no, hey, I'm there, I'll take care of it. But what happened with Coke, for example, was that somebody came and somebody stepped in and formed this group that sort of, suddenly reached a phenomenal number. I think astronomical number, some 300,000 or 400,000 fans in the group. So then Coke realized that, hey, this is, people are misconstruing this to be the brand page. But instead of sort of shooting him down, they said that, hey, why don't you, you've done a fantastic job. Why don't you sort of merge this with us? And then you can obviously be an important part of this group, and you become an important contributor. Now, this is important. In today's day and age, not everybody wants to pick up the phone and complain. If someone like me or someone who sort of crossed, to the other side, we're more likely to tweet about our experience than to actually pick up the phone. And, for example, if I've had a bad experience, just go and tweet or put it up on Facebook saying they're horrible. So, as a brand, as an organization, we need to be cognizant of that and have the necessary steps in place to hook up to each of these conversations and then respond to it. This is, again, an interesting fact. 50% of Fortune 100 companies, I'm sure, is a little dated, but I'm sure this is much more than this now. 100 companies are using Twitter for customer service. Now, this is actually sending, if these organizations have felt, a lot of them are actually in the B2B space. They don't even need to be on Twitter, but they obviously see the importance of it. So if your organization or if your brand is not already there, I think it's high time. And just reiterating a point that I made earlier. So by 2013, at least 35% of customer service centers will integrate. Now, this is more from a global perspective. I'm not sure if this is going to be, but this is still a big number. What this means is that your traditional forms of customer service will have an important link with social media. And this needs to be documented. Because what I've seen typically is that when there's customer service happening through social media, that's an offline process. It's not integrated as part of a mainstream CRM. Now, this I think is very surprising. 40% of Indian consumers are using social, not Indian consumers, Indian internet consumers, are using social networking websites to air their problem. And they obviously see this as a very effective means. So you have, besides the fact that you can write directly to the organization, you also have third-party websites like consumer complaints, a mouth shut, where there is an aggregation of all these complaints that come in. If you are not active enough, and if the brand is being searched, the first thing that you may end up seeing is the negative complaint. So I think this is an important point. Now, so what I've spoken so far are some of the paradigm shifts or some of the important points that I have noticed in this sphere. Now, let me talk about the 3 E's of customer service. You could probably note it down. The first, the most important, is ear to the ground. What is ear to the ground? So ear to the ground is the ability to listen, engage, not engage, but to stream. Social media is nothing but a stream of conversations. So you need to have tools, so you need to have resources to listen to those conversations and then figure out. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. It's a very important point. What this means is that often we form our own perceptions about our brands or our customer service. Here is a valuable tool for you to listen into those conversations for free, right? You don't even need to go to a customer service, a survey organization, or somebody who will, you spend millions of dollars and then come out with results. So here you have the ability to listen to those stream of conversations and then form your own opinion and then understand what the perception about your brand is. So what do you listen for? Complaints, questions, concerns, suggestions, ideas. The first 3 I spoke of, ideas and suggestions. For example, how do you improve your brand? How do you improve your product? Maybe ideas to even start a new product or service. A lot of organizations are today using customer service as a means, for product development. And of course, gauge the sentiment. Now, whom do you listen to? Prospects, customers, fans, competition, influencers. Where do you listen to? Blogs, Facebook, Twitter, communities, forums, YouTube, LinkedIn. So a lot of us assume that Facebook and Twitter is the social media universe, but that's just a component of the social media universe. It's actually far greater than that. So, for example, one big forum that I can think of is Team BHP for automobiles, and that is probably the most influential forum or blog. So, anybody who's an automotive enthusiast, or, for example, I realize that when you're searching for, let's say, I want the review of a certain car that I wish to buy, the first result in a lot of instances is Team BHP. It's not even the company's website, right? And because it is a neutral forum, people tend to believe it more than the organization. So, for example, if I am an automotive manufacturer, I need to have at least a dedicated resource listening to what people are talking about here. Then, of course, there's YouTube and then LinkedIn. This is an important point. You need to compile keywords, what I call a tag cloud. Listen to all those conversations and get a sense of what are the key phrases, what are the keywords around your brand. To give you an example, for example, if it was Hyatt or if it was Pepsi, these are some of the tag clouds or some of the keywords associated around that brand. So as you can see, what does this tell you? This tells you exactly what the perception of what people. A tag cloud, as you may know, is the size of the keywords is in direct proportion to its relevance or importance, right? Now, if you look at Pepsi, you see a refresh there. It says Pepsi manufactured drink, carbonated, PepsiCo, whatever, and then there's refresh. Now, Pepsi did a refresh campaign. I don't know how many of you are aware, but how many of you are aware of the refresh campaign that was done by Pepsi? Heard of the refresh campaign? This is actually a global campaign. So Pepsi does this. I mean, how many of you are aware of the Super Bowl? Super Bowl that is done in the US. So Super Bowl is hundreds of millions of dollars pumped into that, and the most expensive ad spots in the world. And Pepsi does that religiously every year. So for the first time in their history, they decided that I've got all this money, I've got so much to spend, but I'm not going to put that money into Super Bowl. I'm going to put that money into social media, and I'm going to put that money into a cause. What they realized is that a Super Bowl ad is maybe an attractive ad, something that gets your attention, that might even go onto YouTube and become viral. But then that's the end of it. There's a certain lifespan to it. And as far as credibility or as far as rub off to the brand is concerned, I think it's limited. So they decided that let's turn it around and do something radical. And they said that the refresh is where you sort of source ideas and how Pepsi can sort of leverage or step in to do something for the community. So that was called the whole refresh campaign, and it was done entirely on social media. So for the first time in the history, they did not spend money on Super Bowl, and they pumped in. I'm not sure about the exact amount, but I think it's $50 or $80 million purely into this campaign, social media campaign. And that paid off brilliantly for them because eventually they got about 2 billion impressions worth of media coverage. Something that they couldn't have aspired for. So that's obviously worked in their favor, which is why you see refresh. I mean, if you look at the tag cloud, it's Pepsi, and refresh is also somewhere there. Now coming to the next E, is to engage. What exactly is engagement? Now you listen to the conversations. Now you figured out what's happening on social media. Now the next thing, now how do you engage and how do you respond? Because now that you figured out that, okay, people are talking about me in a certain context, I now need to respond. So this is the response. Engage proactively. What do I mean by that? That do not wait for somebody to say that, you guys are miserable, you don't respond, and then respond. So, for example, if, I've just been to a restaurant and I say, hey, this food is good. I say, you should try this out. Immediately, these guys respond back saying that, hey, we'll offer you, thanks for the kind words, maybe a 5% discount when you bring in your friends the next time. So that to me is proactive. That's, hey, this guy's immediately responded. It's almost like there's a response from a friend, but in a very positive tone. So be proactive and don't really wait, be reactive here. Get your best customer, and this is a very important point. Often the extra guy in your team is relegated to social media, and you expect that to be the best way. I mean, there couldn't be anything farther than the truth here. Because what happens here is that, remember that when it's a telephonic conversation, email, or any other form of customer service, it is a one-to-one conversation happening. And it is not public in that sense. But here, everything is visible. Everything is public. Right from the communication, the words, the sentences used in the response, to the tonality, and the response mechanism, everything is visible. Right? So get your best trained customer service guy. So if you do not have a social media resource, get the best guy in your team, train him well, and then put him on the job. Okay. And then, of course, as part of that, you empower. So which is why you get the best resource, you know who's credible, and then empower him to respond. So you don't necessarily need him to come back to you every now and then, and because that only increases the time taken to resolve the problems. Create more touch points with your customers. What I meant by that was, don't just have, your typical forms of response would be email or maybe a Twitter handle. You can also have something on Facebook. So if you have 10 different platforms, let those 10 different platforms also, be a means to communicate with your customer service. Respond in the same medium. So if somebody writes to you on Twitter, do not respond back by email. So if somebody tweets to you saying that I've had a good experience or a bad experience, immediately respond back in the same medium. So, or similarly, if somebody writes back something in a blog, respond back there. And then maybe you can take it offline. So have the initial response, get that connect, and take it offline. And then maybe the closure can also happen offline, in the same medium. So, closure happens offline, but an update happens online. So that is important to give the public, because like I said, it's a public medium, you need to give a sense of closure. So for example, if somebody's written something nasty on consumercomplaints.com about your product or service, the first thing I need to do is respond back to the same blog post. Then figure out, if he's a customer, figure out the customer handle, go back offline, talk to him, try to resolve. And if the problem has been resolved, you can either ask him to go back and update saying that it's been resolved to my satisfaction. But if he's taking time, or if the person is taking time to respond back, you can go back and sort of put a closure to it. The reason why that's important is somebody going through these complaints gets an impression, okay, this company is responding, and this company is serious about customer service. Okay. Then, of course, the third point, which is energize. What is energize? Energize is to create evangelists. So now you've listened, you responded. Now the next step is to energize your customers, create evangelists. So if you've been excellent at customer service, then people will come and defend you and sort of go a step further and say that, hey, this company is actually good. Before you respond, you have these evangelists who sort of respond on your behalf. So transition loyal customers into evangelists. Convert detractors into, this is the best thing. If you can do this, I think, you deserve an award. Because here you're converting someone who's got a bad experience. And how do you do that? This was an experience that I had about 3 years back when there was a customer who said something really nasty and had something written in his blog. So I got in touch with him, and I said that I believe you've had a bad time and we're extremely sorry and whatever. And since he was a travel blogger, I said that we have this annual travel bloggers trip, so why don't you be a part of that? And one of our newly opened resorts, why don't you come along and experience it, and then maybe if you're not happy and you still want to write shit, that's okay, I'm okay with that. But would you like to be a part of that? So he sort of agreed to that. And it's important to draw the line. So this is not bribing really. You got to be very careful. You don't need, because it may then go the extreme wrong way. You may go back and say, hey, they're trying to sort of silence me. So this guy came along with us, experienced it, and because they were an eclectic bunch of travel writers and bloggers, they experienced it offhand. He experienced it, and he realized that some of the things that he had written was merely perception. So he came back. He then said, hey, Arun, I think I had a good experience, but I still want to do an interview with you and figure out exactly. So I have a few questions pressing questions. So I'll ask you those questions, and if you can answer that to my satisfaction. So I had a Q&A with him. He published in his blog. And so we had a few interactions, and eventually he went on to sort of defend and even write a blog post praising one of our newly opened resorts. So I think that is more important, that, besides the fact that you create evangelists of people who say good things about you, how do you convert your detractors, so people who are absolutely negative about you, to people who begin to like you, right? Identify influencers, experts, and harness their power. Now, this is relatively easy, thanks to social media. So, for example, if I am in the business of hospitality, I need to find out some of the key influencers in my space. So, who are the top travel bloggers, or some of the top travel writers in the space, who've got a certain following or got a certain sense of community. Harness their power, get them to write good things about you. Maybe invite them in some of your conferences. Give them tools and then ask them to. But yeah, so identify influencers, then empower the evangelists. Now let's get to, now that we've spoken about the 3 E's of customer service on social media, now let's also talk about, this is obviously important, benefits and cost. Number 1 benefit is that reduces the call and email volume. But it's important to understand that you need to have the right social media infrastructure in place. So it won't happen overnight, but once you've done it to fruition, this will definitely come down. Increase in first contact resolution, this is again a byproduct of that. Increase agent productivity, increase customer lifetime value. And then, of course, decrease the cost of knowledge creation. So what is the 5th point? What is the decrease the cost of knowledge creation? Social media, in a sense, is an aggregation of, is basically conversations and an aggregation of what the perceptions are about your brand. So if you've seeded the right conversations and the right statements, so it becomes some sort of a knowledge base. So if people are specifically searching for a certain issue, they come across a response that is in response to the query. So what I meant by that is that you have a knowledge base created by your community. You have a knowledge base of all the queries or all possible concerns that there are, that is created by the community. So that I think is a big plus. Then, of course, there's cost. How do you set up? To set up infrastructure, you obviously need to get an expert, which is where you have the consulting fee. Then, of course, there's a training and staff cost involved. Marketing of the community. So once you have the community, you have your social media involved. You need to then spread the word. You need to tell people that, hey, we've got this, but then there's obviously a cost attached to it. Then investment in technology, platform fees, software as a service. So SaaS model, as you see, is software as a service. What that means, you don't necessarily need to invest in hardware or software infrastructure in-house. There are free tools out there that you can, subscribe to. Then, basic things like community website design, integration to your contact center, and then analytics. You also need to understand, the whole return on investment thing. So here are some tools that you could use. So the ones in red are free tools, the others are free tools. The ones in red are paid tools, and the others are free tools. So, basic tools like Google Alerts, Twitter search. I'll get into each one of this in a little detail. Dashboards that you can configure specifically to your requirements. Dashboards like TweetDeck, Seismic, Hootsuite, Scout Labs, Social Mention. Radian 6 Buzz Metrics. My personal favorite is Radian 6. Online help desk. So what if you could have somebody come and post their query and then get a response along with maybe an ID or something. So you have an online help desk, and then community forum tools. Let me go to the first one. I'm just sort of running through it because I think we're sort of running short of time. So how many of you have used Google Alerts before? Okay, so I think there's a fair share here. To me, I think this is a very important tool. So you can configure, it's a very simple and very easy to use tool, but very, very powerful and effective. So specifically search for the keyword or terms that you want and the frequency of the alerts that you wish to receive. Right, and then this is how you receive it. Then Twitter search. So if you go to search.twitter.com, right, and you specifically enter the key phrase or the keywords, and you search for it, you basically see all the. Now what you can do here is it's interesting. So you have something called as feed for this query. So this is an RSS feed. So you can then dump it into your Outlook or your email client, right? So every time there is a mention, or if there is a response or something happening around these keywords, it appears in your client. Then there are tools like Social Mention, which basically give you. So this is a free tool. So this gives you sentiment analysis. So as I mentioned earlier, a sentiment ratio is nothing but the ratio of the positive to negative conversations. So what are the, what is the perception about your brand or service? So as you can see, positive 40 to neutral. So to me, positive to neutral is what I would sort of bucket under positive. Right. So long as the negative is kept to a minimum, I think that's fine. Then of course there's my favorite, the tweet deck. It's a free tool where you can you can create columns, customize columns. You search, look for specific keywords. Yeah. Then this is the knowledge forum. This is the knowledge base that I was talking about. You can also use this for support, query resolution. What I can do is, I can, maybe mail this across to whoever wishes, because I've got comprehensive list, and for lack of time, I will just have to sort of run through it. Radian 6 being, I think this is the best paid tool that you can invest in if you want to get into social media analysis or sentiment analysis. So it gives you a snapshot. I mean, you can configure it. They actually have people who will train you to use the product. A very comprehensive tool. You can then listen to what's happening. You can then benchmark yourself against competition. You can find out. You can extract trends that you can use eventually. Yeah. Sure. Right. Right.
There is no, at least I don't know of any which can do voice analytics and at least tell me if this call is going good or bad. And there's like sentiment part of the call, and therefore analytics on top of that.
Not really sure. This is something that was asked earlier in an earlier forum. The problem with voice analytics is that text is that exactly, the construct is there. So for a software, it is very easy to pick up words and put it in context with the sentence and make some sense of what's happening. Voice, it's not easy because you have accents, because it's about synthesizing the voice to text and then making sense of it, right? So I think it is still a manual, unless there's some rocket science or there's something around the corner.
Sure, CIA does a good job of it, but of course it's it's obviously a closed system.
It's out of our reach. But I believe there are tools available, but I'm not sure if they're effective because somebody told me that there is a tool which is being used by some of the call centers. But I'm not really sure about the effectiveness or the accuracy of a software like this. Even with something like this, the accuracy is just about 70 to 80% at the most. So 60 to 80% would be the accuracy in the case of your social media analytics tool. Because things like context, sarcasm is not picked up by these tools. So for example, I was, hey, ad, wow, this was brilliant. Maybe that was completely sarcastic, yeah. And so you think it's positive, right? So that answers. Yeah. So here's a case study. Zappos is probably the company that has inspired a lot of other companies, to improve their customer service by leaps and bounds. How many of you have heard of Zappos? What is that single thing about, or what is that single statement about Zappos that you think sets it apart from, other companies in the space? Have you been a recipient of Zappos? You heard about it. right? So it's an American company, but you know that they've been giving fantastic service. Absolutely, absolutely. Exactly. So, you know, like I said, has raised the bar for customer service on social media. What's unique about this company, before we get into the other points, is that, you know, they have a 365-day return policy. They have what you called, you know, help the customer irrespective of what his concern is. So, for example, I can come to Zappos and say I'm looking for a certain shoe. So they say that, hey, it's not available here, but why don't you try Amazon.com? So that's the competitor, right? Not many would think of that, but that's something that, you know, that sets them apart, and, you know, why they get the customers coming back. So authentic connections with customers rather than selling or promoting products. Dedicated page for Twitter on its site. So they actually have a section within the website. So the CEO, Tony Hsieh, leads by example because he's very active on Twitter. He's also got a blog post, unlike a lot of other CEOs who are on Facebook or on, I mean, not on Facebook, but on Twitter, but barely respond to, you know, to things that are not relevant to the customer at all. Then, of course, there's transparency. So, you know, if you go to the Zappos website, it actually tells you the, you know, the Twitter handles of their employees, and they say that you can go ahead and, you know, speak to them irrespective of their function, and they're obliged to sort of respond. Now, what are the key insights here? You know, before we get to that, let's look at, now we spoke about an example of Zappos that was, you know, fantastic in terms of customer service. Here's an example of customer service gone terribly wrong, and the implications or the repercussions of that. So there's this singer whose guitar got mishandled, and, you know, it was broken in the process, and then United refused to sort of compensate. And then he made this video, and it went viral on YouTube. And look at the number of, I mean, this was taken some months back, and 10 million impressions on this video alone, right? So this is exactly what will happen if you think that, you know, your customer is weak and can do nothing. So wrapping it up, understand that one size doesn't fit all. So, you know, not all forums. Now we spoke about Facebook, Twitter, forums, blogs, all that. You don't necessarily need to get into all of that. For example, if you are into B2B, you may probably need to skip Facebook, maybe a LinkedIn, Twitter, forums may make sense for you. So pick the medium that makes sense for business and prioritize your investments there. I mean, you know, this applies everywhere. So, so in your interactions, obviously try to reach out to those 20% who are the most influential. And I'm not saying that ignore the rest, but I'm saying that when it comes to the kind of response, keep that in mind.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
I think one thing which I personally struggle with is, you know, this Pareto thing.
Right.
Where 20% we say, you know, it's okay to at least cater for 80%. The severity of those 20% is something that we are not able to measure, you know, and how that severity actually impacts the 20%. If somebody misses a flight and is trying to get to his mother who's probably in hospital,
right,
there's far more severity, and if he actually falls in the 20%, it's a big no-no for me.
True.
So this is what at least I struggle with, and how do you deal with this?
Yeah, so here the dilemma is that, you know, on one hand, you're trying to respond to, are you trying to respond to influences first, or are you trying to respond to complaints that are more severe in nature? So I think that it's good to have levels and then have maybe different turnaround times for each of these levels. I think that makes sense. So for example, if you realize that if it's a generic complaint that can wait, let's say your average turnaround time is about 4 hours, you know, maybe you can say that, okay, I'll resolve this in 3 hours. But if it's really severe, then, you know, immediate response, immediate resolution, you know, have different levels of severity. And then have different people trained to handle. So if you're a big organization, you can, you know, afford to have maybe 3 or 4 resources, you know, specifically handling these cases. Okay, sorry. So if a brand, I'm just wrapping it up. So if a brand lacks confidence, then it will not want to listen to negative conversations. So this is very, very important. If you think you are not ready to respond, or you're not ready for all that negative, the deluge of negativity around you, and if you know, just want to get defensive about the questions or complaints, then you should never be on social media. You know, If you are truthful about yourself, about the brand, then please. Like I said, no social is better than bad social. So if you do not have, if you're not ready to respond, if you're not ready for all that, then maybe you should stay away. And then, of course, lastly, be human, authentic voices, empower staff. Thank you. Questions, or was it comprehensive? Yeah, great. Sure. Okay.
So are there some metrics that you use or have used in the past which we can look at to link positive social media, or even, you said bad social media is not good, but actually it's an opportunity for you to make it good. How do you link that with ROI and footfalls, and et cetera?
Right. So to me, ROI is return on influence, not necessarily return on investment here. So you need to then specifically understand. I mean, it depends. Lay down your objectives. What is it that you expect from your social media activities? For example, are you looking at bringing down the number of negative? If that is something, then that should be your, a metric. For example, the virality. For example, is a certain conversation leading in a 3 times, more viral conversation? And maybe things like, is it reducing? For example, reducing the amount of calls coming to your call center. That could be one of the metric, right? So, sort of define the problem, come up with your objectives, and then sort of find metrics in social media. Any other question? Or is that, or I've got a signal to wrap it off?